Hello, and welcome to Question in a Bottle. In this series of short discussions, private investor Mark Atkinson answers questions sent in by listeners and subscribers to his main podcast, The Desert Island Investor. So, let's take a look and see what's in the bottle that washed up on the beach today.
Okay, right. Well, when do I sell? So, very similar question from two listeners, Brucey5 and Declan Hughes. And Brucey asked, how long do you run your winners, and do you ever take profits? And what sort of number of stocks do you typically hold, and for what period of time? And Declan, on the same theme, said, when do you decide a stock has run its race and sell? I know you have said you are a reluctant trader and predominantly a holder, but surely there must come a time to sell. So this was interesting, and this is why when we ask for questions, very often from experienced shareholders or investors, and it's an opportunity for me to give some extra thought where I wouldn't have done otherwise. So when Brucey asked that question about how many stocks, I can answer that quite quickly. 32. Got 32 stocks. And how long do you typically hold them for? So I did quite a bit of groundwork on this, digging back historically, and which I wouldn't have normally done. But I found out that the average number of years that I've held these stocks is 8.5 years. So I've got to put a couple of little caveats in that. That includes a couple of stocks whereby, so Somero, I mentioned that in a previous podcast. I was forced to sell that because but with Barclays, and they said you can no longer keep that stock because it needs a W8 Ben form. So I left to join another broker and immediately bought that back. So I've said that that's a continued holding. And then there's a couple of stocks that I've got whereby they've been the subject of takeovers, a couple, and I've gone with the Predator business, so I've maintained that link. So a couple of those would be Entain, the gambling business, and also another one in the portfolio, which is a very small starter position, is a company called Franchise Brands. Now I bought a position. I've never bought any Franchise Brands stock. It was a company called Filter. And they had a business cleaning out restaurants and the kitchens of restaurants and fast food outlets. And I thought that was an interesting business. Anyway, they got and they ran a franchise and they got taken out by a similar business, Franchise Brands. So I've included those as I've traced those back to the original holding that I had. So when do I look to sell? Well, I really hope that I've got the discipline now to just run these winners as long as I can and not just try and take the profits. And the companies that I do look to sell are really, if I think the story's changed, if I realise that I got it wrong, or if it's a business that I feel that I can't master, or if the holding over time hasn't become significant enough, and I just think, well, it's taking up a place in the portfolio, it's time for go, or if I just decide, well, this business, it's outlived its uselessness, shall we say. So I would just really try and run my winners as long as I can. I think when people try to take a profit, there's a sense that they are somehow locking in that profit. So they put it into another stock. Well, there's no reason why that other stock couldn't just then go down. It's not locked in a hard way. You can easily lose that money in another stock rather than the one that you were doing quite well with. And if we go back to that length of time in which I've held those stocks, I would argue that I've got to know them very well, or reasonably well, because I've held them that long, and I've got a bit of a feel for them, more so than just keep switching into another business. So it's a case of when to sell, and if you think back to, there's a gentleman called John Stith Pemberton, and in 1888, he invented a temperance drink, and he sold part of that to a number of partners. He sold part of it to a gentleman called Asa Griggs Candler for $239, I think it was. And then Asa went around and bought out the other partners out for a total of $2,300. That was in 1891. Probably quite a bit of money back then, 1891, $2,300. So we fast forward, and that business was actually Coca-Cola, and it's now worth $255 billion. So that's 120, 130 years later, and I would have argued that was never a good time to sell Coca-Cola. Just run it and run it and run it. And obviously there's been a lot of changes to the business over that time. But I really do think this part of the concept of the desert island investor is that if I was to be stranded on this desert island and I couldn't touch the portfolio, that things would be okay when I got back. The portfolio would probably have metamorphosized quite a bit, but it would have taken care of itself. And I would say that the selling side is more difficult than the buying side, really. That is sometimes, if you were to say to me, when do you sell? Probably a lot longer after I should have done. So that's very often the case. You look back and I should have seen that. But for me, part of the beauty for the way that I run the portfolio is that it's light touch. I did, looking back to last year, some added information. I did 12 trades. That was one every month. Now, some people do those 12 trades on the first day of the new year. Now, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be glued to a screen. I want to enjoy life. Yes, I look at the portfolio every day, but I'm not just sat there worrying about it. Not out. I'm going to be able to go out for a meal later on. I'll be conscious that I need to get back to my computer to see if that stop loss has been triggered, or that I'm short in a stock and I can't take my eye off the ball. So hopefully I can stick to that discipline. And as far as winner go, I'm just going to really try and let them run and run and run. So thanks for your questions, gentlemen.
Well, that's all for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember the content is for information only and it is not financial advice. If you have a question for Mark for our Question in a Bottle podcast, just complete the form on our website, thedesertislandinvestor.co.uk. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.